Alright, we're just gonna run through this since we've actually already, many of you have already seen this presentation, so we're skipping through a lot of literature, but just to get you.
Before we do it, my name is Joshua Hill.
Hi, Joshua Hill. I'm John Alexander Watford. We're senior psychology majors, and we're working on how group-based expressive writing can be used as a coping mechanism for ambivalence about the future. Just to give a quick reminder, ambivalence is approach avoiding conflict within the self, and this ambivalence tends to increase self-reported stress and anxiety about the future. And so we're interested in finding out whether group therapy or group discussion, in the case of our experiment, will interact with expressive writing to produce a greater stress reduction and academic motivation increase than expressive writing alone. So again, talk about how chronic stress leads to bad things. Expressive writing leads to a reduction of the stress-related symptoms. And so we noticed that group-based interventions often tend to have a positive impact on these things as well. So we are interested in finding out what happens if we use a group discussion in a group of students who also do expressive writing, whether it's a sort of a combined effect.
So basically what we're doing is we're taking 40 college students as participants. That's our target audience. We're recruiting from psychology and English courses in Morehouse College. We've asked from both fields several teachers whether or not they'd be willing to give extra credit during their in their classes for participation in our study. So that's just a little incentive we have.
Okay, so we're doing some interesting things with our methodology now. So because we're interested in finding out whether there's a combined effect of this expressive writing and the group-based discussion, I'm also realizing that some of you may not have remembered like expressive writing as a whole. Expressive writing is essentially a concept developed by James Pennebaker, which is if you write expressively or you write pretty extensively and in-depth about things that have affected you or made you experience some sort of negativity, it tends to help you cope with it and move forward. So we want to have all of the college students that we mentioned participate in a study in which they write expressively about stress about the future or ambivalence about the future in order to see the impact of this group discussion. So this pilot that we have is a typing versus writing pilot, and we're interested in seeing if there's an impact of typing on a computer versus writing out. This pilot is necessary because we're going to be doing most of our study on Qualtrics if this pilot doesn't tell us any differently. And so we're going to be using Qualtrics to present the questions that we'll be asking people to respond to in the expressive writing intervention. So on Qualtrics, they will see a pretest of the perceived stress scale and the academic motivation scale, and they'll take the test, and then they'll go into answering certain questions about things like what about the future is causing you stress, what is your ideal future, how are you working towards changing that, working towards that ideal future. And they write about these things and then have a post-test of taking the same scales to see if there is a difference in each group. However, the difference is between the groups is that there is a discussion, is that one is going through a discussion group and one is going through expressive writing only. Both groups are participating in the expressive writing intervention. Only one is participating in the group discussion. 20 participants each group.
So this is just a basic graph just to show how we're doing it. So what we'll have is one experimenter will be in one room, something similar to this, and then the participants, which will be 20 people per group, they'll have like their laptops out and they'll be able to write about whatever it has, if the pilot is correct. If not, they'll be writing it by hand. But so essentially the first group, the control group will.
Could you stop right there?
Go ahead.
When I look at the graph, we've got participants, and you got two columns. You know, you got the 20, and then you got the 20 over here. I don't understand why that's like that. Is participants, is that like first session, second session, or what?
I'm
I
sorry.
mean, why is that like that?
That's residual from something before.
Yeah,
But
it's just some formatting things that we've had, just between the previous and last slides we tried to do in order to.
So that really could be in one
it can
column.
be in one
Yeah.
column. So for anybody, any confusion, that should be in one column. There's just 20 in this group, 20 in this group. It's not a first or second
Okay.
session.
Yeah.
Just for clarity's sake on that, we'll be having having 3 administrations of the intervention that we're going to be having to try and make sure that we're maximizing participant turnout. But we're just going to have all of the participants at the same time both times.
Also, minor point, since you got the heading participants, you should have a heading for the first column. Something should go up there in
Okay,
that area.
check.
Alright, but go back real quick. As I was saying, the control group will essentially just only have the Qualitrix, type the expressive writing, do the pre-test and the post-test, and that'll be it. The other group, which will be in another room, will, after doing the pre-test and post-test, with the writing in between, they'll have, a certain amount of time for discussions about the questions that they've had. So, for instance, if they have a question, like the first question will say, talk about your ideal future for the next 5 years or something like that. Then the first question, the first discussion topic will be, 15 minutes. We'll talk about this first question. Somebody give an example about what your things, how do you think they'll do, obstacles about that problem, and things like that. That way we'll have, we're trying to have at least a similar amount of time between how much you write and how much you have a discussion on it. So that's what we're trying to do. But depending on, how the discussion may go, if somebody having a really good, topic to discuss, you might push it a little bit.
And they do the post-test after the group writing.
After the
after the
group
group discussion.
discussion and the writing, yes. And another thing for clarity's sake that should be noted there is that the experimenter that's administrating the discussion has sort of a narrative that's already been written, so that can be replicated every time. And the experimenter isn't constantly engaging back and forth with the group. The group is interacting amongst themselves once the question is presented. That way the experimenter doesn't influence the turnout like the results of the study.
So the 2 surveys that we've chosen, as we've talked about before, are Cohen's Perceived Stress Scale and the Academic Motivation Scale. Both of these scales have been shown very often. There's been a lot of studies about the reliability and validity between these studies, especially the Academic Motivation Scale was shown to have, to be reliable cross-culturally. So it's not just, Caucasian students in the PWI, it'll also work on, a variety of different people.
And hopefully at a historically black college, which will be where our sample will be used. So we really like that scale because of that cross-cultural validation that we have noted in our paper. So some of the intended benefits for this are the potential solutions for ambivalence about the future or reducing that stress that tends to affect college students, which can in turn hopefully improve their academic success during the time that they're in college. It'll support the combination of therapies and just additional support for that, whether it be group therapy mixed with medication or any number of things that might come together as combined effects in order to reduce stress or improve academic motivation. We want to enhance the expressive writing knowledge base. If the hypothesis is confirmed, we'll investigate the application of these findings to addiction treatments and trauma treatments. We're talking about those things because group-based therapies have been used in those settings, and that's where we pull group-based interventions from. And if they haven't used expressive writing, we want to add it there. But then we want to sort of do the reverse, and where expressive writing has only been used, maybe add the group-based piece. And so investigate different topics of writing and their effect on the findings. We want to look at that because obviously that's the limitation of the study. And also if the hypothesis isn't confirmed, we want to review the differences between this study and others in the literature on expressive writing to discover why this might have been an ineffective accommodation. Thank you. Any questions? Really are silent in this furrow crowd.
Yeah, I gotta stop.
Yeah, you have a question mark right
Yeah,
here.
it's
Just
literal.
hanging out.
Back up, what's the title again? What's the title?
Group-based expressive writing as a coping mechanism for ambivalence about the future.
Okay, so curious,
Why we use the ambivalence term.
No.
Okay.
I'm curious about why it is that you have, and it kind of gets back to the last slide, or one of the last slides. Why do you have one group of people write, one group of people do the writing in the discussion, but there's not a group of people that just do the discussion with no writing? Like why is that not also the control of an interest of yours? Discussion, no writing. Discussion and writing, just writing. Like why don't we have that group as well?
Well, the thing is, so much of group therapy tends to be on group discussion, and that's a lot of the literature that we're pulling from. And so if we already have seen like the effects of group therapy tend to be present, and therefore like a lot of group discussions tend to have that effect already, we already see that tends to have an effect. And we already see that expressive writing tends to have an effect. So this study is largely focused on the interaction between the two, less than it is on,
But you look at writing, no group, right? So you are interested in, you do believe
Okay.
that writing has a, like you believe, if the literature already says that writing has an effect by itself,
Why
you
not
are
check
checking that. So why not also check group by itself?
suppose we really for comparison. That's an interesting thing we could add to the study, most definitely.
I don't know if it's feasible.
But,
There's only a feasibility.
well, right, like, and that's another reason why we haven't added it at this point. I mean,
But
but
limited time.
Limited time.
Resources.
we would have to get a whole, like, a much larger sample.
So, but how many people, can you go back to the first one?
40.
Go back to the methods. Yeah, but you could, so the group discussion, that's 20 people in the group, right? Okay, and there's 20 individuals just doing writing. They're not part of the group, right?
Yeah, they don't do group
They're
discussion.
not a part of the group. So if you had, instead of 40 people, you had 10, 10, and 10 participants, you have fewer participants, less people. You can still do that. I mean, I hear that you're saying that it's a feasibility issue, but you can also, that's within your control. You drop from 40 to 10, 10, 10.
Or
That's
45 and do 15.
Yeah.
just follow up. The only point is that doesn't have to be a limitation.
Okay.
That's something that you would figure out. You can change that.
I just worry if they'll have enough power to actually detect any differences
That's what I
between
was
their groups
thinking.
if they cut them down to 10, 10, and 10.
What about 15, 15, 15? I mean, that's 5 more. And then,
Yeah.
I'm just.
And I think what you have to look at is your outcomes. So I was curious about the, go to your outcomes of interest.
And see, ideally, what I had wanted was we had talked about 30 in each group.
I don't think they're here.
No.
I'm sorry.
I was just telling you they're not running them forward at once.
Yeah, what originally I had proposed was 30 in each group. I had to look at the time, right? And, I could see Dr. Murray if they, and I really like what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think really it's the time constraints, because they got to do this, by the end of the semester. And if we drop to 10 or even 15, that reducing that in makes the test, makes it less powerful, I feel. I'm 20 is to me borderline. Ideally, I'd want 30 in each group. But
Can't you do a power analysis?
That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna say. You could go to G-Power, go online to G-Power and try to
and
see
see,
how many people you need per group based on, so go back to your outcome. That's what I was gonna say. One, you have to look at you know, what, where are your scales? Yeah, like you have to go back and look at that data to see what effect, you know, what reasonable effect you think you could have in that intervention. And then put that in and figure out if you're powered to detect a difference in stress. But I'm more worried about your ability to detect a difference in motivation.
Also, tell me if there's I don't know if it's a problem. In terms of IRB, since this is what we submitted, is that change feasible without an adjustment?
So if you add another group,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a protocol change, so I would,
so you
my
have
understanding
to
is you go back to IRB.
report back to them, which again would extend the process and time.
You don't have to do the suggestion. I was just
No, but
pointing
it's
out
something to
that
think about.
it
But it is
it's something to think about. You should identify why you're not doing that,
Right.
and don't kind of, I think it's easy to lean on.
Yeah, because IRB can get you in a couple of weeks. Like, they can get you before you come back from spring break, because it's an amendment. It's an amendment, not a full new review. And also, my question was actually why not a true control?
Like nobody doing it.
Yeah, like, so no one gets a thing, because, yeah, and I get why you have kind of standard of care is expressive writing, because research has already
That's what
shown
I
that it
said.
works, so it's like the minimum treatment.
That was
But-
my original
Right.
idea.
So I think in the future, you could also consider having a true control just to make sure you show. Because the problem is if you find there's no difference between these groups, you know, groups, they get expressive writing and group discussion, you'd still ideally like to say, but regardless, what previous literature found is that there is still a difference between true control and expressive writing, right? If you make collection groups.
I think you may lose time with your pilot. I don't know if it's necessary. I think you can get a lot of great information from it. You haven't done it, right? You haven't done it.
No, we're planning on doing it tomorrow.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
no.
they're doing.
And it's pretty quick.
Yeah, and we were doing it really small, like
Okay.
6 participants.
Okay.
Make sure you put that in your methods, right under preliminary analyses, to help justify your methods.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
pilot, so the participants in the pilot are not participating in the overall. They would just say something positive. Right there.
But
But
you guys
that's
have identified a
convenience.
conference that's on campus of people that, didn't you identify a conference, you said, that's happening at Spelman or something, and people that you can recruit from?
Yeah, that I was hoping to recruit from, but I was hoping to be able to do it there, but it's not gonna happen.
Okay. Well, we are up on time.
Yeah, thank
Troy
you.
has to go, and then, thank you guys, good job. Troy, we're very excited. Thank you for your patience, Sarah.
It's the final.
Thank you. Wait, is this an outline?
I thought you wanted a full.
I said I'm not reading the full version.
Okay.
I will read the outline, yep.